We are going to talk about this very important topic, which a lot of Salesforce administrators and beginners in Salesforce keep on thinking about, is how to become a Salesforce senior developer, how to basically switch career path from a Salesforce administrator and become a Salesforce developer, or a senior developer rather, in Salesforce. This is a question which I have got a lot of times, and in fact, I have seen a lot of Salesforce administrators struggle to basically, make this leap, or make this switch. So they kind of are stuck with a Salesforce administrator role, and they keep on thinking that what would be the best ideal approach for them to get into a senior developer kind of a role. And in fact, I've seen people spending a lot of times. I've seen people spending 2, 3 years, 4 years in just trying to basically make that switch, but still they continue to struggle in that. So I'm going to talk about what should be done, what can be a practical roadmap, what should not be done, things to avoid, things to do versus things to not do or stop doing. That's what I'm going to cover here. So first of all, let's quickly start with a bit of understanding of, or breaking the myth. So let's understand a bit about what a senior developer does. So usually I've seen there is a little bit of a misconception that a lot of Salesforce administrators or the beginners have about what actually Salesforce developers role would be. So let's quickly address this, because this is important. If you understand this, I think 30 to 40% of your work is done. So first of all, let's quickly understand a Salesforce senior developer. A Salesforce senior developer basically is not someone who knows more Apex keywords. So it's not someone who knows Apex really well. It's not someone who just knows Apex syntax. It has to be beyond that. And I'm talking about, the keyword here is a senior developer. I'm not just talking about a Salesforce developer who has just started, right? So Salesforce senior developer is not someone who would just be good with Apex keywords or syntaxes, etc. No, it's beyond that. So what does a Salesforce senior developer do? So a senior developer is someone who designs before he starts coding. So it's not basically about just go start writing code. No. They think about the solution, they design the solution, they think about data volumes. So every time we are trying to write a logic, we'll have to consider what sort of data volume are we going to deal with. Considering that data volume, which would be the right approach, synchronous, asynchronous, a lot of thought process goes into that. Understands the governor limits, etc. So Salesforce, of course, even as administrators, you would understand that Salesforce has got limits associated to everything for obvious reasons. It's a it's a on-cloud solution, and it's a multi-tenant architecture. So based on all those factors, it is very, very important for Salesforce to have these governor limits, and those governor limits are there. Another thing that a Salesforce senior developer would do is write code that others can maintain. So it's not just about writing the code for now, but we will have to think about code which is meant to be maintained over a longer period of time, something which would not be very difficult to maintain, right? So these are the things that a Salesforce senior developer usually should be thinking, or usually is involved into, right? So it's not just about learning Apex code, etc. So if you're really looking to make that career progression, if you're really looking forward to enhance your career, you'll have to consider those factors. So the good part is, and this is actually important, and this is something which is coming from my experience as Salesforce administrators, you would already know 40% of what your developers or senior developers are doing. So this is something very important that you need to understand. And in cases even more than that 40%, right? Because Salesforce administrators do understand a lot of things. They understand the security concept, they understand the objects, relationships, the overall structure of Salesforce, the licensing part of it, the sandbox part of it. So a lot of reports and dashboards, etc. So a lot of components within the Salesforce ecosystem is already known to Salesforce administrators, right? So you already know, and this is the important part, this is something which you should be actually using for your advantage, right? So you already know 40% of it. And in addition to things that I spoke, there are other things which you can basically try to build more concepts around development. For example, if there are validation rules, so try and understanding the conditional logics which are there in the validation rule. If there are flow decisions, try to understand the if-else concept around that, right? Because understanding those concepts is very critical. It's not just, again, as I said, not about syntax. It is about whether we understand the overall flow, right? You understand the security model, with that you understand with sharing, etc. Which is of course something which is known to Salesforce administrators. You try and understand the automation order, trigger order. So if there are multiple automations or multiple logics getting executed with one particular operation, what should be the ideal order? So try and understand those things, and these things are to a certain extent known to Salesforce administrators, right? Now the next one, important part. what you must stop doing right now. So what you have to stop doing right now. So there are, I mean, as I said, I have seen Salesforce administrators who are trying to make that switch, but they have been struggling for more than 2-3 years, but they're not able to make that right switch. And where are they going wrong? So there are a few things which I thought possibly, which I have seen with people where they are going wrong, and things that you should strictly avoid and stop doing. So first of all, stop watching random Apex videos. That does not help. If you're just watching it randomly, okay, doesn't help. Stop copying trigger code from blogs. So sometimes what happens, we just go to a blog, we copy the code, we paste it in our Salesforce environment, the code is working, we are pretty happy. That's fine, but that's not the right learning path for you. Stop thinking certification is equal to seniority. So I have also seen some people start focusing a lot on the certification part of it, getting towards the PD1, PD2 and all that stuff. But again, that's something which may not be the only thing which will be important. That can be one of the things which is important. But again, in that priority list, certification would sit, somewhere below some of the other factors like understanding concepts, etc. Stop building basic examples only. So sometimes you again, if you're following a lot of YouTube videos, or if you're doing a lot of reading blogs, etc., you may end up getting some basic code snippets, and you may be either writing or you may be copy pasting some of the code snippet. So that will really not let you switch or become a senior developer. That can give you some basic understanding, but that you still continue to remain as a Salesforce administrator. So that is the thing. Now, here I have got a very clearly defined 6 months roadmap for those who are really serious about it, who are really wanting to make a switch towards it. I thought it would be good for you to understand what sort of a 6 months roadmap you can use, right? So month 1 should be ideally about mindset shift and trying to understand what you need to know, etc. Right? So for month 1, you should try to learn a few things. So try to understand the execution context, right? So the Salesforce execution context, how does it work, etc. Try to understand order of execution, which is very important, right? So try and understand and have, in fact, build a deep understanding about order of execution, etc. Try understanding the CRUD concepts, FLS concept, the field level security, and try to understand, how do those things impact code, if there's a logic or a code written, how would that impact that? And then try and understand when automation runs versus when code runs. So automation versus code. So sometimes there is this confusion between automation, code, same thing and all. So try and understand the key difference. So first of all, it's very important to understand what the code is doing versus what the code is not doing versus what is out of the box from Salesforce, etc. So those things. In addition to while you are doing this, your certain things that you may want to do as hands-on. This is critical. Rebuild an existing flow. So if there is an existing flow, look into that particular flow. Any project you're part of, you can see a flow and try to find a simpler one initially. Then you can get into more complex ones and try to see if you had to rebuild it right from the scratch, how would you rebuild it? This will help you build some of the logical concepts. Try to rebuild the logic in Apex. If you can go to any of the existing Apex triggers or Apex logics which are written, try to see if you had to build it right from the scratch, would you do it differently? You don't have to write the code for now. At this stage, you are still at the mindset shift, but see if you are able to understand, if you are able to basically think on those lines. And then, once you have rebuilt some of these things, you can start comparing maintainability, limits, performance. So see, the way you have refactored or rebuilt it, is it better as compared to the earlier one? So you try, doing those comparisons. So that can be your first month goal or target. Second month, start with building foundation. Now, this is the critical stage where you actually start getting into the real world, knowing things, etc. So learn your Apex classes, triggers, learn your trigger handler patterns, frameworks. Then understand about learn about your Apex classes, triggers, frameworks, patterns. Understand bulkification. How does that work? How can it impact your code? Understand collection, sets, maps. So not just the usual code, but try to work with your sets, maps, etc. So so that your code can work for larger set of records and not just for say 2 or 5 records, etc. As part of hands-on, you can write Apex triggers and classes. You can test your Apex code. You can build some trigger framework, and this will help you basically build your concepts. And when so you would say that in build foundation, I've primarily spoken a lot about Apex and I've not got into LWC. I personally believe that if you start getting into Apex and LWC, if you are an administrator, you're from a non-coding background, getting into both the things parallelly may confuse you. So try to gain more confidence in Apex at initially, and then maybe try to get into LWC. LWC, once you have started understanding Apex, etc., will be comparatively easier for you because it's more of front end that you will be designing. But these are the core concepts that you work with in Salesforce, right? So try to build your skill sets around this. The next one would be the next milestone for you would be basically the month 3, the third month. You start understanding performance. Now this is where you start understanding the higher level concepts, right? Or the advanced concepts of performance, because writing a code is one thing, but if my code would work for 50,000 records, will it work for 5 million records, will it work for 50 records or something like that? So that depends on us how we have written the code, and for that we have to understand performance and stuff like that. All right, so like data volumes, performance, optimized SOQL queries, etc. So those can be your key things. So here if I have to write, you can think of SOQL queries, you can think of data volumes, you can think of overall performance, right? So these are going to be critical things that will be important. So here from a learn perspective, you can try and focus on understanding selective versus non-selective queries, understand indexes, both the standard and custom indexes, relationship queries at scale. So if you have to write relationship queries at scale, then how would you write that? When SOQL fails silently, so try and understand your SOQL queries, how and when they fail. So build concepts around those. As part of hands-on, you can basically build a feature that breaks at high data volume. So now try to intentionally build a feature, or think of a feature which would fail at a high data volume. So with a bigger data volume, it would fail. Then identify the performance gaps. Then try to understand, okay, fine, what is the issue, why it is failing, and then refactor for performance. So this is going to be the critical hands-on here. I know it is not going to be very simple, but yeah, you're targeting this for an entire month. So you'll have to try for building some sort of I would say logic or a feature where it fails, and then you try to understand where the gap is, then try to fix the gap. All right. So this is going to be a critical learning path which will help you understand how do we identify the performance gaps, and then how do we fix that and all that stuff. So it is going to be a huge learning. Next would be your advanced knowledge on some of the concepts. So this month 4 would be including some of the advanced concepts like asynchronous apex, integration, etc. So you can start learning your all asynchronous apex concepts. These are all asynchronous apex, right? You have future method, queuable, schedulable, batch apex. Try and understand when to use asynchronous versus synchronous apex. This is important. While a lot of even Salesforce developers understand how to write batch apex, but when to use batch apex is something which is very critical, and I really find that a lot of people really do not have that understanding. So try and understand those things. Try to understand your call out patterns, etc. for integration. Try to understand error handling strategies, what are the ways to handle errors, debug your code, etc. So those things can be part of your this phase. All right. And in hands-on, you can basically build some queuable chains. You can write batch job with state and schedule it. Try to schedule the batch job. Try to do some mock callouts, etc. So this can be the learning path here for the 4th month. And then for the next month, it is going to be about understanding the testing concepts in Salesforce. So in Salesforce, of course, I'm not talking about testing as in the testing team. In Salesforce, when you're building Apex code, that Apex code needs to be tested. So there is a separate testing framework which is available in Salesforce. It is used to test the code, right? And only once your code is tested and it has got at least 75% code coverage, then only you can move it to production, right? So that is a mandatory thing from Salesforce side. So this month you can completely dedicate towards testing concepts. Now, testing concept, when I talk about this, it is primarily not just about writing those test methods or test classes, right? It is about understanding the test data strategy, because at a scale when actual development happens, there are more concepts which we need to understand or work with on this, right? So you start understanding your test data strategy, you start understanding test setup methods. So how do those work? Testing bulk plus negative scenarios. So how to test negative scenarios, and try to work with meaningful assertions, etc. As part of hands-on, you can pick some test code, okay, and then try to achieve 100% coverage in that. So let's say you already have some code, and you're trying to basically usually 75% is required. 75% is required to be deployed to production. However, you should, as part of your hands-on, you should try to achieve 100% test code coverage, because I want you to spend time to get yourself to a position where you are able to write test classes or test methods which give you 100% code coverage. Okay, and try to write tests that fail when logic breaks, etc. So that will basically help you understand these testing concepts pretty well, right? The next month, or the final month, this is going to be critical, and this is where where you try to bring in all your learning for the first 5 months into that one single month. And the best way to do that is just do one end-to-end project. And when I say end-to-end project, I'm not talking about just one random dummy project. No, try to think of a real business scenario. It can be a business scenario of the company that where you're working. You can take that business scenario or something else. Just pick, but it has to be a real business scenario. Till the time you're not thinking about a real business scenario, you are actually not thinking about real problems. Dummy scenarios will have dummy problems, and then it doesn't work. So think of real business scenarios, try and understand the problems, etc. Then build a complete app trying to address all the challenges or all the problems that you could identify for the real business scenario. So try to build your objects, fields, relationships, etc. Okay. Then next step would be, once you are done with building the app with your objects, fields, relationships, in addition to these, possibly, think of building some pages plus, some of the actions, etc. Work with those as well. Then the next step can be build your logics using Apex triggers and flows. So try to build those logics, automated logics, etc. with both triggers as well as flows. Add asynchronous logics. Try and understand the use of asynchronous. As I said earlier, that you should understand when to use synchronous versus asynchronous. So you'll have to start here. You'll have to start understanding that when I need a code to run synchronously versus when do I need a code to run asynchronously. For example, if there's a record that needs to be updated, you don't need to really always do that update real time, right? So if there is an update which is required for a reporting, and the reporting happens once in a month, and that so you really don't need to do that field update immediately when the record gets created or updated, right? Because the reporting is only going to happen once in a month. So I can possibly try to run my asynchronous logic right before the report, or one day before the report is to be executed, so that all the records are updated, right? So that ways, think about these things, understand those. So add asynchronous logic, again, no dummy logics. Try and understand which one will be required synchronously versus which one will be required asynchronously, and then build a test strategy around that. Try to understand how the testing will be done, how test methods will work, how the test data will be created, etc. Meaningful test data is important, right? So it's not just randomly just create test data. The reason why I was saying that just do not go randomly copy paste some code and work on it, because in that scenario you really do not understand what goes into in actual project execution. So if you're done with this, by month 6, just dedicate the entire month for doing this project. Take scenarios, try to implement those things. I also have some projects which I have built, so you can possibly follow some of those projects. Or if you are actually interested and if you have a scenario you would want me to possibly do some sort of a demo for that kind of a project, please feel free to share that with me, and I would be happy to pick one of those projects and then build around it. Thank you.